Okay, first of all, before I dive into this video, I want to make something clear for everyone. In my first listen of, and my first exposure to Ren with High Ren just a few days ago, probably rightfully so, some of you commented in the Virgin Rock community that this is not rock music. And I acknowledge that, and I am aware of this. But I chose to do this for several reasons. First of all, it was you, the beautiful Virgin Rock community, who brought this to our attention and encouraged us to explore it. And I have a lot of confidence in your musical tastes and your musical recommendations. And so that was one of the things that pushed me in this direction. Of course, I can do this off camera on my own time because I could keep the Virgin Rock channel strictly rock. But I have already not done that because you have seen me at times delve into metal perhaps a bit more heavily than some of you liked. And so I don't feel it's a problem to occasionally take a little sidetrack, because there's one thing that I strongly believe, and that is that good music and good art transcends and defies labels and categorization into genres and subgenres. If it is eloquent, if it speaks to us, if it feeds us, if it helps us to grow as humans, as if it helps us to develop and to appreciate, then, and if it helps us to express, then it doesn't really matter what genre or label is applied to it. And in fact, it's often hard to take the best of those kinds of artworks and apply one specific label. And that is why I felt comfortable setting out on this Virgin Rock journey at the very beginning. Because while I may not know the genre of rock music and all its fine details and information, terminology, history, techniques, but I love music and I love art. Remember that I am a classical musician, not a rock musician. And I accepted this challenge to dive into rock music not because I wanted to pit one against the other, but because I knew that there must be something of value in this other musical style with which I am unfamiliar. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And as you are by now aware, I do appreciate its value. At the same time, and in the same way, I am also open to acknowledge and appreciate the value of any genre, of any art. Of course, that doesn't mean that this Virgin Rock channel will lose its focus. But whenever an outstanding artist is born, whenever I become aware of somebody who really has a gift, I like to look into it, and I like to enjoy it and grow by it. Of course, I could have done this off camera. But since this discovery of Ren was brought to me by you, my Virgin Rock friends, I thought you would appreciate my experience in exploring it a bit more. And if it's not something that you personally want to get into, that's fine. I'll be jumping right back into rock music, and you'll see the next video up in just a few days, and you can wait for that. Now, back to Ren. The evening of the first High Ren recording, after I was done recording that day, Vlad and I were eating supper, and we were having this whole conversation about Ren, what I had heard, and all the different things that we both found and appreciated in that performance. And I mentioned that I heard a lot of Welsh traditional music and poetic art influences in his music. Some of you in High Ren commented saying, "This is rap. You have to understand this is rap." Well, interestingly, as I was doing my first listen of that, that thought did come to my mind. Of course, I don't know near enough about rap to be able to identify and say this is rap and this is not rap, because just like anything, there are genres and subgenres, and the edges are often blurred, and I don't know where spoken word art begins, where spoken word art ends and rap begins. I don't know how much of rap is in here, because I don't know rap really at all. I am somewhat familiar with spoken word art, with poetry, with the concepts and traditions of Welsh poetic arts and musical arts. And I think you might remember I mentioned that I have a bit of a soft spot for Welsh music and musicians. And so I have spent a bit of time, although I don't claim to be any expert, exploring these things. And that's what I found in Ren's music. And I guess here I'm curious to see how it's going to manifest itself. And probably along the way, I will talk a bit more about it. So during our supper time conversation, Vlad told me that one of the best examples of Ren's work from this perspective of the traditional Welsh arts that I was telling him about is this piece, which actually many of you recommended since you heard my first listen of High Ren, and that is his trilogy entitled The Tale of Jenny and Screech. And that is what I'm going to listen to today, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm very curious to see more of what he does and how he does and what is accomplished by it. So what I'm going to do is Vlad tells me that this is very important to watch the visuals. So I am going to do a complete first listen without pausing this time, so that I can focus on what I'm seeing on the screen as well as what I'm hearing. I have the lyrics here, and I'm going to make notes along the way of what catches my ears, and then I will come back to those points. I won't do a complete rewind, full listen to the entire thing a second time, but I will note where I want to come back to and listen again and talk about. And then at the end, of course, I will have some final thoughts, summarize whatever my impressions are, and let's see how it goes.
Now, what you need to remember is that these videos were done in a single shot from start to finish. But of course, they were done separately in different days. But it's just incredible that it was just a single camera shot by Ren's friend and videographer, which I understand it's called Sam. For me, that's impressive.
I guess from what I've learned about recording, that's impressive.
It was a quiet, dark night in an empty street somewhere in London City. Jenny walked alone, she was dragging her feet. She was heading back home to sleep. Well, she knew this town, she knew this floor, because she walked it about 1,000 times before. She wanted to escape. Can you blame? Well, on the very same night, in a different place, there walked this hooded young youth by the name of James. He was 14 years old and out of his brain. He'd been smoking ganja with the boys. James, he grew up to be a kid of the street. His mates called him Screech. He was quick on his feet. He was a liar, a thief. At 14 years old, the devil had set his sights on his soul. As Jenny walked home all alone, she felt scared. Usually she was alright, but it was like there was something in the air. A divine intervention telling her to beware, maybe intuition bogging her and making her so scared. Sirens sounded in the distance to the beat of Jenny's feet. A symphony of the night that echoes crime on London streets. Jenny turns a corner, their eyes they meet. Up or go Jenny, a boy named Screech. Give me all your money, bitch, give it to me. If you cooperate, then you'll soon be free. I want your purse, your phone, don't fucking look at me. I mean it, bitch, are you listening to me? Jenny freezes statue like a lady shakes stalactite. Feel like liquid nitrogen in the dark night. She tried to find strength to move, but stayed as still as a statue in high-heeled shoes. What the hell you playing at? You playing games with me? I swear to fucking God, I'll slice the rosy off your cheeks. You think I don't mean it, go? You don't know me? The last thing you see will be a boy code. Screech reached with the sheath of the blade, with the teeth that could bite through steel and slice concrete, and he swung possessed with the devil in his chest, and the statue she was turned to butter in her breath. It was a quiet dark night in an empty street somewhere in London City. Jenny lay still on the cold concrete. She's found somewhere to sleep. Well, she knew this town, she knew this floor, 'cause she'd walked it about 1,000 times before. I guess that she escaped. It's such a shame. Our story, it starts right at the end of the life of poor Jenny, clocked out like Big Ben. Dear Screech, dear boy, where did he go? He melted into the black night just like snow. Patrick, man, let me in, please open the door. I think I fucked up, Patrick, really fucked up, man, I'm not sure. I got crazy, left this lady lying still on the floor. I think I killed her, Patrick, come on, man, I can't knock no more. But Screech kept on knocking till his knuckles became sore. But there's no sign of Patrick down at number 54. No refuge for our villain, for the bitter hands of fate, with something far more sinister in mind that does away. Hey, babe, you in? Nah, nothing really, I'm just a bit tired, listen. Can I swing around yours for a few moments? I just really miss you, babe. What the fuck do you mean you're busy? You fucking bitch, for fuck's sakes! Siren sounds approaching like a banshee in the night. The shrill cry of justice cutting like the sharpest knife. But Screech was never one to run, not one to miss a fight. One hand upon his blade, he turned to face the blue lights. Come on then, you fucking cunts, let's fucking have you then. I am Screech, I'm the boss, I'm the ender of men. You think that uniform you're wearing means that you own these streets? These are my fucking streets, and they call me fucking Screech. Richard was an officer who stood at 6'3", working London on the night shift. What he didn't think he'd see was a boy running at him like an animal possessed. With no time to hesitate, he fired 4 bullets at Screech's chest. Story, it ends right at the start. Young Screech and poor Jenny lying one street apart. An officer shaken by the boy that he claimed. 2 bodies lay lifeless, and it's such a shame. It's such a shame. London City, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington is fighting just to stay alive. Rhythmic beeps and bloodstains, she saw a lady weep. She's tired and frail. To set the scene, we must rewind the hands of time for Violet's tale. Violet was a silent girl, grew up with violent starts. Her mother was a drinker and her father was a bastard. Every night he took her tie but never left the room. I'll spare you with the things he did, I'm sure her mother knew. Violet was a silent girl, she moved out at 16. A semi-detached council flat, paid for by a welfare scheme. Packing shelves at Tesco, stacking jars like pickled bricks. She met a boy named Stevie and he was a little prick. Violet was a silent girl and Violet she fell fast. See, Stevie was a wrong un, but he sure knew how to charm her. Every night he took her tie but never left the room. History repeats itself, he'd paint her black and blue and dark. She never stood a chance. The devil comes to dance. Violet, why are you always so quiet? On her bedroom door and he's irate. He's been drinking and smoking, he's up late. And he stands by her bedside, she shakes, but her eyes stay shut. You fucking slut, I know you're up. And he pinches her eyelids and folds them up. Violet, why are you lying to me, Violet? She stays silent, things turn violent. That's the sound of his fists when they fall like a crashing pilot. hit like hailstones. One to the collarbone, full force, full blown. Blood's black bone, crack, knick, knack, paddywhack. One to the jaw and the tooth spat. Detached fist connects and disconnects a bone. A quick deflect to misdirect the blow. But nonetheless, his punches met her throat. Such a mess, he's left her bruised and broke. Violet, why you always so silent, Violet? Why you such a little liar, Violet? Do you think I want to do this, Violet? In character, she stays silent. Well, say something, Violet. Silence. Fucking say something, Violet. Silence. Wait. Say something, Violet. Not one word. She stays quiet. London City, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington is fighting just to stay alive. The doctor, in a state of shock, saw something here so very wrong. See, Violet, she was pregnant. Poor Violet, she was 9 months gone. Turning to the doctor, Violet broke her silence and she cried, if I'm to die right here tonight, please let my baby stay alive. The doctor soon regained composure, called the surgeon to come in. As Violet's world turned to black, the curtains closed, the lights went dim. In London City, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington just lost the fight to stay alive. A tragedy or a miracle, it happened on these very streets. Two twins are lying side by side. A girl named Jenny and a boy named Screech.
Wow. Okay. So, I have made some notes and I'm going to go back and talk through different points that caught my attention and caught my ear in the story, in Ren's presentation, in the music. But I have so many ideas in my head right now. My head is spinning a little bit and there's so much to process because it's not just the music, it's the visuals, it's the story, it's his acting, it's his singing, and it's a lot. So and I took some notes as I intended, but I need a little time to organize my ideas before I go into this next part. So give me just 15-20 minutes and I'll be back. Okay. Remember I mentioned that I had a soft spot for Welsh music and musicians. Well, I want to tell you a bit more about that now, because I've listened to Ren, I've taken a few minutes to reflect on this song, what he's doing, and I want to tell you a bit more about my experiences and what I know about the Welsh musical and poetic tradition. Ren himself calls his musical style, what he does, his creative style, bardcore. And a lot of you have told me this. And after watching this, I think it makes a lot of sense to identify it like that. Because the Welsh, as many other cultures as well, have this tradition of bardic storytelling and the troubadour art and craft, the bard art and craft. Now, in the Welsh tradition, they have a tradition of both musical art and spoken poetic art. And the two are very closely intertwined. They work with each other, and yet they are separate because they have very specific realms of operation and rules of creativity. One of the traditions that combines these two is something called Penillion. And it's a kind of music, a kind of musical performance, which is a harpist and a singer, or sometimes a group of singers, but let's say a singer. And the harpist plays a traditional tune, something that's fairly well known, and has a clear, known harmony and melody. And the singer improvises on top of that known piece of music a melody and lyrics of his own creation, or at least using a piece of poetry that he then creates a melody for. Traditionally, I understand on the spot, in the moment. It's very improvisatory, and yet there are very, very specific rules of when the harp starts, when the voice should enter after, who should end first, and this overlapping. And it's fascinating and really quite complex. Now, how do I know about this? Well, I had the privilege in my student years of attending a summer music academy one year, in which one of the guest artists was Eleanor Bennett. And Eleanor Bennett is a well-known, a renowned harpist, Welsh. And she's not only classical, but she is very committed to preserving and cultivating the traditional Welsh musical arts. If you look her up, you can find all kinds of stuff about her. But this is not about her right now. But in this summer experience that I had with her, she told us a lot about Welsh music, Welsh poetry, these traditions, and she's very skilled in them herself. In fact, she has kind of helped to revive them and continue the traditions. As a young person, she wanted to preserve this tradition of Penillion singing. She was a harpist. She's also a singer. But she didn't have a Penillion singer to work with. And so she learned to do both at once. That is not the traditional way of doing it. That was her way of getting into this without having the resources of another traditional singer with which to work. And in this summer experience that I had, she gave us a concert of her performing these traditional works. She was playing complex music, and she was singing in the Penillion style over it. And it was absolutely breathtaking. We were fascinated. I was completely taken into the idea of this, and I loved it. It was so special and a really unique look at what can be achieved when someone really is committed to these things. Now, watching Ren, the way he does so many things at once immediately made me think back to this concert by Eleanor Bennett, where she was functioning as both artists in one, the harpist and the singer, both at once. Now, unlike most of my first listens and in-depths, where I focus mostly exclusively on the music, this time I want to look more at what Ren is doing. And I have a reason for that, which I'll tell you at the end. Of course, we'll look at the music too, but I want to take in the whole thing that he is doing here, because that is one of the things that is so beautiful and special from my perspective of his work. And I want to emphasize that I am not talking about his music genre, but about his art and what it encompasses. So, let's think about this. Ren is, first of all, he's playing his instrument. Secondly, he is singing. And thirdly, he is acting. all at the same time, all live, all in front of the camera. Now, what do we call this? Well, playing an instrument and singing, it can be done. That's a singer. It can be a rock singer like John Lennon or Freddie Mercury, or it can be Eleanor Bennett with her Penillion and her harp, or it can be a classical musician singer at the same time. And then we have singing and acting. Well, that's the type of thing we see in opera or in Broadway style theater music. And that is also something that's not, we wouldn't say it's highly unusual. But when I see Ren playing the instrument, singing, and acting all at the same time, well, that's more special. And I guess I would say that's Ren. But it's not only that. One other very important aspect of what he is doing is the fact that in all of this, he is alone. Meaning, he doesn't have a band or some other musicians or instruments playing or singing together with him, backing him up, giving him breathing room. It's only him. He has to carry the whole show himself. And why do I think that this is extraordinary? It's because it means that he is the only person producing all the sounds, sound effects, music, with his instrument, with his voice, while playing, which, if he misses a note, if he fluffs a line, it's very, very easy to notice. I feel like it's kind of like some incredibly beautiful but exposed music. For example, as a pianist, I think of Mozart. I have this thing about Mozart. Vlad can tell you. Sometimes I hate Mozart because I hear so much of it played so badly. But that's to the side. The reason it's so difficult is because every single note is so exposed. Not all music is created that way. And here, what Rin is doing, every single element is exposed. If you would have another guitar, some drums, maybe a synthesizer, or another singer, or somebody helping him act it out, all of these might help cover him a bit. But remember, he is doing all of this live in front of the camera, and I understand that each one of these parts of the story, each of the 3 parts of this story, were shot in one take. Of course, each of them different times, but complete sections in one take. And as somebody who's gotten and is getting used to being in front of a camera on this channel, and knowing how it feels so different from performing live, as well as knowing how challenging it is to keep the memory clear when performing live, never mind in front of the camera, on stage, all of this makes me feel quite impressed with what Ren is achieving here. So, then, my question, Ren, are you the next generation of Penillion style singing? Penillion style creativity? Penillion version 2.0? Which, of course, I'm using this term a bit loosely, right? But my point is, we have multiple things happening, each with their own rules, each with their own creative elements, and all of them have to be combined into this one unit. In this case, by one person. Now, I said I won't take you through the whole song again, and I won't. But I want to take you through different parts of it and point out different things that have stood out to me in my first listen. and some of the details which help us to understand and experience this story the way we do. So, let's dive in together. Let's listen to the first minute together, because I want to point out some details here which kind of set us up for the rest of the story. Even before we start, we have this first close-up image which we can see, and which is the start of the movie. It's his hand, it's a close-up view of his hand on the guitar with a frayed glove on his fingers, a bit rough and rustic looking. It conveys the idea to me of a troubadour as he presents himself, a bardic storyteller. Even the colors here, getting into the movie, we see that he's dressed very contemporarily. But in this first visual, it gives you the rich colors that we often associate, at least in movies, of ancient times. We have this deep maroon, we have this black, this dark wood color, and even the rings on his hand. I mean, I'm looking at this, and this close-up gives us a fairly, shall I say, medieval feeling. And that's how we start. So, let's give it a go. You hear this music? What does it remind you of? That opening. To me, it reminds me of old dance music, like from the Baroque period. Well, an example you probably know is Bach's Bourrée. Bum 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 bum. Now, compare that to what we have here, and notice the similarities. Bum 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 ba dum bum bum. It's all the same style, the same textures, a little melody with this catchy little rhythm. Dum bum 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 bum. And then he takes it and he extrapolates more out of it. It morphs a bit. It becomes a textural variation. Here. And then it extends into the musical introduction. And then we go to the next moment. Now, I won't be going into every single detail of every single thing that I noticed in this trilogy. We'd be here for hours or probably days. And I think that each one of us has the capacity to observe and discover so much of this. You don't need me to tell you every single thing. However, we'll go through this first minute, and I also want to tell you that this way that this first episode begins, with this guitar in this sort of Baroque traditional dance style, dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum. Every single one of the 3 episodes begins in the same style. If you listen, you'll notice it has that very traditional, classic feel to it, musically. And that's how he sets us up for each new chapter. Now, the first one I have written down here, the first moment, is minute 0:20. And I want to play it, and then I'll tell you what caught my eye, my ear. These carefully placed sonic events that he puts throughout this movie, I'm going to call it. Like this one. He's playing, he pauses, and then he leans up against the wall. But he leans up in such a way that you hear it clatter a little bit. And he uses that clatter, that noise, that sound, as a way of accentuating specific moments in the story. You will hear him do that with different sounds throughout this movie. And that is one of the things that is very well used by him. And then, right after that, this way that he goes into singing. Such an interesting way of singing. It's so descriptive. Already, without saying a word, just hearing that sound and watching him move on screen, you get the picture of what kind of story you're going to hear, simply by this little tune and the way he sings it. Another sonic event that he inserts here is this one that at first feels like, and perhaps was, unnecessary thing with his voice. I don't know, he's such a natural actor. I can't tell what is something that he had to clear his voice, or was it timed and planned? But it works as an incredibly well-timed marker of the next part of the story. It had such a wonderful little
quiet, dark night in the empty street,
detail
somewhere at London.
And sets up the singing so well. Other things like, okay, let's do minute 105. If I can get here, we'll start here, 102. And like his little cough and the little clatter against the wall, notice his gesture here.
Well, on the very same night in a different...
We could say a little nose scrub. It's not a sound, but it's a gesture. And yet again, it conveys fine details about the character and about the story he's telling. As I said, I'm not going to go through all of these details, but here are a few to get your eyes and your ears sharpened and looking out. And I think that if you take the time to look at it through this kind of lens, you will be quite fascinated and hopefully impressed, as I am, with what he's achieved here. Now let's listen to a little bit longer clip. Let's start at 105 and go to 205, because I picked that out as an example. And it's so hard to pick a single example, because this is so saturated with these things. But here's an example, a 1-minute example, of how he uses his musical styles and shifts and changes to kind of, we could say, change our angle of view, our perspective on the developing story, rather like camera angles do in a movie.
Well, on the very same night, in a different place, there was this hooded young youth by the name of James. He was 14 years old, and out of his brain he'd been smoking ganja with the boys. James, he grew up to be a kid of the street. His mates called him Screech. He was quick on his feet. He was a liar, a thief. At 14 years old, the devil had set his sights on his soul. As Jenny walked home all alone, she felt scared. Usually she was alright, but it was like there was something in the air. A divine intervention telling her to beware, maybe intuition bogging her and making her so scared. Sirens sound in the distance to the beat of Jenny's feet. A symphony of the night that echoes crime on London streets. Jenny turns a corner, their eyes they meet. Oh, poor girl Jenny. a boy named Screech. Give me all your money, bitch,
Now
give
we're
it
back
to
to
me.
this.
If
This
you
is
cooperate, then you'll soon be
Screech.
free. I want your purse, your phone, don't fucking look at me. I mean it, bitch, are you listening to me? Jenny freezes statue like a lady shakes stalactite. Feel like liquid nitrogen in the dark night. She tried to find strength to move, but stayed as still as a statue in high-heeled shoes. What the hell you playing at? You playing games?
And so it goes. But you hear how he's shifting guitar styles, music accompaniment styles, with the characters that he's narrating, singing, presenting in his story, in his lyrics, in his poetry, however you want to identify it. And this is a very good example of a way in which you can color and shape and guide the listener to understand who is speaking and what is happening simply by changing the music that goes along with it. Now, classical musicians do that all the time. In fact, Wagner is famous in the Ring Cycle, which is a massive work, for using what we call a leitmotif. And I guess it shows up in literature as well, so you might be familiar with the term, where a particular little motif is associated with a particular character. So when you hear that, you know it's that character. Rinna's not using quite a leitmotif, but he is using his guitar to help us understand and identify different characteristics and different personalities in the story. Now, I want to explore each of these elements: the music, the poetry, and the acting that Ren does, as well as perhaps acknowledge the camera work of his friend along the way, because that also is an incredibly nicely done and helpful part of this. But I've picked out different things and we'll take them one by one. So we started with the music elements. Let's continue with that. Moving on to about minute 220. Let's see if I can get there. Yes. And this little segment, we hear the guitar musical effect, and then the suspense of a held chord, and then the voice takes the musical lead. And I've picked this one also to highlight his versatility that I see here, because I see that he is so quick on his feet, musically, stylistically, as well as the whole thing. He's going from one to the next without missing a beat. And the ability to shift gears so rapidly is really exciting to watch. And so this is where we can see a bit of that gear shifting happening in the music. Here we go.
Reach with the sheath of the blade, with the teeth that could bite through steel and slice concrete. And he swung possessed with the devil in his chest, and the statue she was turned to butter in her breath.
Suspense of that chord.
It was the quiet dark
And now
night
suddenly
in
it's
an
his
empty
voice
street,
that's taking the
somewhere
lead.
at London City.
The guitar
Jenny
takes the
lay
back
still
seat and just
on
helps
cold
to
concrete.
support.
She's found somewhere to sleep.
These little details that do such an incredible service to the story. And as I said, it's very interesting to notice the things that are consistent from one movement to the next. For example, the way each of the three movements starts with a sort of Baroque style traditional guitar, and then he develops that into a more improvisatory, dramatic storytelling style, and we begin to pick up a more, we could say, modern vibe to it by the time he actually begins his singing or reciting. And it helps to provide a continuity and a unity, a feeling of opening the next chapter when we find this consistency in the way each one is presented. Now moving on, here's another example that really caught my ears, and it shows up around minute 8:18. It's the way in which, now we're in the third chapter. We're hearing Violet's story now. And I noticed when we got to this story that suddenly the sound of the room was so much different. There's so much more reverb. There's a feeling of space and echo, a sort of coldness, and in a large empty space. And it felt to me in my first listen as if he was intentionally using this reverb and his voice to convey a sense of distance in time as we are stepping back into something which came before the previous two stories. Notice how this happens. This is pretty normal. We're looking off something that happened long before. I love that little chromatic line. Isn't that lovely? And then, of course, to take us even further back in time, or I should say, backing up time within this story. So this entire Violet story comes from a time past. We hear that with the reverb. But then within Violet's story, he has to back us up a bit more. And he does this really fun little trick right about here, where we hear him rewinding the clock, or winding the clock of time backwards, and we hear the spring get more and more taut.
She saw a lady weep, she's tired and frail. To set the scene, we must rewind the hands of time for Violet's tale.
Winding up, winding up, winding up. I think that's just a great little touch there. And as I said, I could go through all of these musical details second by second and have fun exploring every single one of them. But I think that's enough for you to get the sense of how intentional and how specific Wren's musical content is in here. Now let's shift a bit and look at the lyrical content. Well, Wren seems to know how to write lyrics that grab you and hold your attention and color the story, as well as even causing them to say what is left unspoken. Listen to this one. When it's talking about Screech, after he kills Ginny, he melted into the black night just like snow. And when I heard that, it caught my breath. This contrast of the blackness of night and what that represents with the whiteness of snow. He doesn't say white snow, but he says just like snow. And he's talking about how snow melts. But we naturally associate snow and the whiteness of snow with purity because it is treated that way so many times over and over and over in classical tradition, in folk tradition, in it's just built into our cultural awareness to think of snow as representing purity. And the juxtaposition of those two ideas here, that Screech, for all this horrible crime he's just committed, he's a bit like snow. There is some sort of purity about him, or at least he is not intentionally criminal. And it heightens the tragedy of the story and the poignancy of the story. And it cuts into us a bit and makes us stop and think how Screech and all he represents is a victim too, even before he ends up being killed by the policeman. He is a victim of his circumstances, of the life that has been handed to him. And this little phrase says all of that without ever saying a word about it. And it is things like that that I absolutely love. And then, of course, the colorful, expressive, visual descriptions built into this. Jenny freezes, statue-like, a lady-shaped stalactite, fear like liquid nitrogen in the dark night. And then it goes on and says, the statue that she was turned to butter in a breath. It's so vibrant, so descriptive, without feeling like it's laboring to be so. You don't miss any of the details. It brings it into bright contrast in front of you. And you are suddenly confronted with this picture of Jenny in this moment, and the struggle that she feels of fear and needing to do something and being unable to do something. Again, it's wordcraft. And then going on, in Violet's story, Violet was a silent girl. I noticed how Wren repeated that many times. Was it about 4 or 5 times or something? And by repeating it over and over and over in the story, he forces us to ask ourselves, why the repetition? What does this mean? It seems that Wren doesn't want us to miss something here. So, in order to answer the question for us, he makes Steve ask 2 times to Violet, Violet, why are you always so quiet? And then again, close to the end, after this quietness and silence of Violet has been repeated and drilled into us, suddenly Violet broke her silence. And what does she say then? Essentially, if I am to die right here tonight, please let my baby stay alive. That is Violet. In spite of the fact that she is silent and withdrawn, there is, in this phrase, a representation of Violet being a fighter for life. It seems that that's what she's interested in spite of all that assaults her daily and has assaulted her for her entire life. Her focus is to survive. And when she recognizes that she herself is about to lose this battle for life, she continues to fight, and her last cry is essentially, I want my life to continue, although I'm dying now, but at least please save the baby. And in a way, preserve some of my life. Wren's poetic ability is so highly descriptive, and not only the coloration and the vibrant, detailed pictures that he conjures in our minds, but he also demonstrates an awareness, acute awareness of the inherent musical, what I'm going to call the musical elements embedded within the language itself. Things like rhythm, pitch, pulse, syncopation, pacing and tempo, legato and staccato, the use of vowels versus consonants, and different voices, an ability to take those elements and to use them to sculpt a character, a mood, a scene. And this is another reason. I noticed it, as I said, in Hyren, that what he does with language and with his lyrics, he reminds me, he makes me think of the poetic arts. And yes, I'm sure, although I'm no expert in rap, I'm sure that some of this, perhaps even all of it, I don't know, could be classified as rap. But rap is yet another art dealing with the rhythm of words. I guess I tend to think that Ren is more nuanced than at least what I think of as being rap. Well, you know what I thought of about rock before I got into it, so perhaps my judgment of rap is entirely unbalanced as well. But the way I perceive rap is being highly rhythmic and focused on the rhythm of the words. Ren is focused on far more than just the rhythm of the words. And so I think that he's a bit more complex and developed in his poetry. Now going on to the acting. Let's take, let's see, how about 437? If we back up a bit. I picked this bit because I think it's a good example of what I'm going to call his athletic versatility. I mentioned it earlier. His ability to switch from one musical style to another and immediately shift into a dramatic acting event. First he's the musician, then he's the actor, then he's the storyteller, and all of these things. And it comes one after the other, right on the heels, sometimes overlapping. And it's all live in the moment. It's obviously he had to have rehearsed and practiced this because he's doing this all by memory, right? But still, it's so natural and feels unforced. And it's so flexible, so dynamic. And all I can say is it feels very artistically athletic. It's the athleticism of his performance. So here's a little bit that I feel like portrays that quite well, displays that quite well.
Man, I'm not sure. I got crazy, left this lady lying still on the floor. I think I killed her, Patrick. Come on, man, I can't knock no more. But Screech kept on knocking till his knuckles became sore.
Notice
but
how
there's
his
no sign
guitar
of
is
Patrick
changed,
down at number 54.
as well as his voice.
No refuge for our villain, for the bitter hands of fate, with something far more sinister in mind that does away.
Pause. Okay, now he has to switch to more of an actor's role, calling the phone. The way he's breathing, you know, he's pacing.
You in?
He's so
No,
into the
really,
character
I'm just a bit
here.
tired, listen. Can I swing around yours for a few moments? I just really miss you, babe. What the fuck do you mean you're busy? You fucking bitch! For fuck's sake!
And within the acting role, he's agile.
Siren sound
And suddenly he's
approaching
back
like
to
a
music
banshee in the night.
and
the shrill
poetry
cry, justice
and
cutting like
singing.
the sharpest knife. But Screech was never one to run, not one to miss a fight. One hand upon his blade, he turned to face the blue lights. Come on then, you fucking cunts, let's fucking have you then.
Of course,
I am Screech, I'm the boss.
He's
I'm
Screech
the
here,
ender of men.
and
You
he's
think
portraying
that
very well. Listen to the
uniform
guitar
you're wearing
again,
means
and
that
his
you own these
voice.
streets? These are my fucking streets, and they
Watch
call
what
me
happens
fucking
here.
Screech. Richard was in office.
He's out here like this, and then suddenly he's back to his instrument. That shows incredible awareness and spatial control of getting from one place to the other right on time for the story. I looked at it in my break again because I wanted to see how much did he search for that chord. Hardly at all.
Richard was an officer who stood at 6'3", working London on the night shift. What he didn't think he'd see was a boy running at him like an animal possessed. With no time to hesitate, he fired 4 bullets at Screech's chest.
Notice what's happening here. He is using both his voice and his instrument. Now suddenly the guitar becomes his gun, and he's striking. He's shooting from his guitar, from his gun. That almost takes me back to Pink's axe. Watch this here.
Screech's chest.
And the dramatic pause between each. And notice, here I have to credit the camera work. Because notice how it shakes a bit. It shakes a bit. And then it's as if we are seeing from Screech's view as Screech falls. And everything goes sideways as we are now laying on the street as Screech. Just in that moment, just now, I noticed something. Screech and street are so close in sound. And Screech is a child of the street. I don't think that was unintentional. In this moment, this is where Ren is portraying Violet and saying she never stood a chance. And notice that as he says that, we hear the reverb again, as if we are looking back in time. She never stood a chance. And we see this endless spiral of stairs. Look at what happens here.
Paint her black and blue and dark. She never stood a chance.
It's like we're looking into infinity.
The devil comes to dine.
And then we're brought back down to what's happening down here. Okay, now, just coming up here, basically right at this moment, here's what's another moment that really caught me as representative and special in his ability and what he's doing. And as I said, what impresses me about this is that Ren is doing this all live, on camera, uncut. Every band, a lot of bands and musicians have videos that they put out and have these little stories, movie stories that go with their music. Sometimes it's a movie, sometimes it's them acting something out, sometimes it's them playing in some exotic setting. And we all know, we can hear with the sound, that the sound was recorded in the studio, it was edited separately, and then the visuals were superimposed over the sound, matched with the sound. But here is Ren, and everything is coming from this one event that he's recorded. The sound, all that he's doing here. That's what I find so impressive about his work. That's what makes me say that regardless of how you categorize his style of music, he is an artist in the way he conveys his vision, his work. And he is very skilled at it. When I see somebody who's very skilled, I find it inspiring, impressive, and I appreciate the difficulty of the challenge of what is being done here. And that is one of the things that stands out to me with Ren is it's him. It's him on the screen. Live, uncut, everything all at once. This basically one-man show, one-man movie. You could say one-man opera theater, and all in one take. Sound, visuals, everything at the same time. And that is why, one of the reasons that I felt it was worth my time to pause my rock for a day, a few hours, and pay attention to Ren a little bit longer. Because what I saw in High Ren, I appreciated not only the message, but the artist. And I don't want to just rush on past without giving it a little more time to dig in and appreciate what he has to do. So now coming to this moment here, just like an actor, you feel like he's really in the actor's role here. He's singing, acting, playing. This is one of his intense moments in the story. When he's acting out one of the darker characters. But you see what he's doing. He's leaving the building. He's stepping outside into the night, on the street, while the scene continues, while the camera is rolling, just like in a movie. But remember, it's just one person. It's one person doing this music as well as the acting, all in one take. Let's watch this.
Violet, why are you always so quiet? On her bedroom door and he's irate. He's been drinking and smoking, he's up late. And he stands by her bedside, she shakes, but her eyes stay shut. You fucking slut, I know you're up. And he pinches her eyelids and folds them up.
Acting the character.
Violet, why are you lying to me, Violet? She stays silent, things turn violent.
Smoothly one to the other.
That's the sound of his fists when they fall like a crashing
Narrating,
pilot.
explaining.
Hit like hailstones, one to the collarbone, full force,
Playing.
full blown, blood's black bone, crack, nick, knack, paddy whack.
Reciting.
One to the jaw when the tooth spat, detached, fist connects and disconnects a bone. A quick deflect to misdirect the blow, but nonetheless his punches met her throat. Such
Now
a
you
mess,
see him
he's left the
physically
bruised and broke.
moving
Violet,
as
why you
the
always
character.
so silent, Violet?
Here he is.
Why you such a little liar, Violet? Do you think I want to do this, Violet? In character, she stays silent.
Narrator.
Well, say something, Violet. Silence.
Character.
Fucking say something, Violet. Silence. Wait. Say something, Violet. Not one word. She stays quiet.
And then he's back to playing his guitar again. It's such a great example of what Ren is achieving here. And then we see the same thing in the guitar, only now the clock is unwinding. It's bringing us back to the present in Violet's tale. Listen. And we're almost to the end of Violet's clock. As everything comes to the end and the story is unfolding its last secrets, the entire scene ends abruptly. And all of a sudden, we understand Ren's point. Let's look at these last few seconds of the story together.
London city, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington is fighting just to stay alive. The doctor, in a state of shock, saw something here so very wrong. See, Violet, she was pregnant. Poor Violet, she was 9 months gone. Turning to the doctor, Violet broke her silence and she cried, "If I'm to die right here tonight, please let my baby stay alive." The doctor soon regained composure, called the surgeon to come in. As Violet's world turned to black, the curtains closed, the lights went dim. In London city, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington just lost the fight to stay alive. A tragedy or a miracle, it happened on these very streets.
Remember
Two
that
twins
tragedy or miracle.
lying side by side.
Twins.
A girl named Jenny and a boy named Screech.
And that's how the story ends. As I got to the end of this video the first time through, I suddenly felt like I had been through this kind of story in the past. And it took me a moment to think. And then I realized this reminds me of the short stories by O. Henry. He was a master of the short story and making a final surprise twist at the ending. And many times, most of the time, his stories were centered around the working class and the criminals and the social outcasts. And they all a lot of them had this pull on the heartstrings element of highlighting some of the tragic elements in the lives of these people. And I feel like Ren's story here has a good deal of that in it. Now, before I give you my final thoughts, I just want to say, if you have enjoyed this video, and if you want to help me out in my musical exploration and journey, then please like and subscribe. And maybe if you want to do more, check out my Ko-fi and Patreon pages, because I have all kinds of things there for my members and special supporters. Now, as far as the message of this work, because I've been talking a lot about, okay, this is impressive, this is amazing, I appreciate Ren's abilities, his art, his craft. He's a master storyteller. I understand why he calls himself, his style, bardcore, because I see that how he pulled that together. But then there's the question of, what is the message of this work? I do believe that there is an important message in it. And it reminded me of Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. The way that song ends. We're fools to make war on our brothers in arms. Screech didn't know that Jenny was his sister. And not only his sister. Ren's using all that he has at hand to convey his point. Jenny was Screech's twin sister. They were as close as any human beings could be in kinship. And we get the feeling, listening to this story, that had Screech known that Jenny was his sister, Screech, who's portrayed as rather violent and out of his mind, would probably not have been violent towards her, but would have served as her protector. But precisely because he was ignorant of this reality, he became her killer. Look at the way Ren plays with words and meanings. I've pointed a few out, but there's one more. Violet resembles violent. There's just a very subtle difference between the two. And Violet is anything but violent. She is quiet, passive. She is the recipient of violence. But the Violet's offspring, the offspring of this beautiful and fragile flower, ended up as victims of violence, both actively and passively. Because as I said earlier, I believe that Screech was a victim also. You see, the doctor saved the twins' lives, but one ended up killing the other. And this is Wren's message. We are brothers, all of us. If we somehow manage to understand this, then violence and crime and war will come to an end. If we understand this truly and appreciate our kinship as the precious thing that it really is. And then dreams like, let's say, Eve Miriam's dream will come true. She said, I dream of giving birth to a child who will ask, Mother, what was war? Or we can think of Dr. Martin Luther King, his famous, I have a dream. And what was this dream really? It was that one day, all the former enemies, the oppressors and the oppressed, the perpetrators and the victims, would be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream today, the recognition of the brotherhood of all mankind. And I believe that Wren is asking, is this trilogy, this story, as he says, is it a tragedy or a miracle? It looks like a tragedy. It feels like a tragedy. And it cuts us deep. But it could easily be a miracle. If by it we can learn the lesson that he wants us to understand, then it will be a miracle indeed. I am very happy to see that that dream is still alive, thriving, strong, and that young artists like Wren and others continue to embrace it, to carry it, to hold it up before all of us, knowing that only by daring to dream and choosing to believe, only in that way will this impossible one day truly become true. I'll see you next time.